why your English is not improving. 5 real reasons nobody tells you. Have you ever finished an English lesson, closed the app, and thought, why am I still struggling? You study grammar, you watch videos, you learn new words. Maybe you've been doing it for months, maybe even years. And yet, when it's time to speak, your mind goes blank. The words disappear, and suddenly, you feel like your English hasn't improved at all. But what if the problem isn't your intelligence? What if it isn't your memory? What if you've been working hard, but in the wrong direction? Because the truth is, most English learners never hear the real reasons they're stuck. Not from schools, not from apps, not even from many teachers. And today, we're going to talk about 5 of those reasons. Some of them might surprise you. One of them might completely change the way you learn English forever. Let's start with a story. A few years ago, I met a student named Maria. Maria was dedicated. Every morning, she studied English for 1 hour. She completed exercises, memorized vocabulary lists, watched grammar videos, and she did this consistently for almost 2 years. 2 years. Now imagine what happened when she finally traveled abroad and tried to have a simple conversation in English. She froze. Someone asked her a basic question, and suddenly her confidence disappeared. Later, she said something I'll never forget. I know English in my head. I just can't use it. That sentence describes millions of learners around the world. Maybe even you, because knowing English and using English are 2 completely different things. And that leads us to the first reason nobody talks about. Most people spend their entire learning journey collecting English instead of living English. Think about it. Imagine someone who wants to learn how to swim. So they buy books about swimming, watch videos about swimming, study swimming techniques, memorize swimming vocabulary for months, for years, but they never enter the water. Would they become a swimmer? Of course not. Yet that's exactly what many English learners do. They spend years collecting information about English, but very little time actually experiencing English, listening naturally, thinking naturally, speaking naturally, making mistakes naturally. English isn't a subject. It's a skill, and skills grow through use, not through storage. The moment you understand this, something changes. Instead of asking, how many words did I learn today? You start asking, how much English did I actually use today? And that question changes everything. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because many learners actually do use English. They listen, they read, they practice, and still feel stuck. Why? The answer hides inside a mistake that almost everyone makes without realizing it. Imagine you're learning to play the guitar. Every day, you practice the same easy song. You play it perfectly, again and again. It feels good, comfortable, safe, but after 6 months, your skills haven't grown much. Why? Because growth lives outside comfort, and English works exactly the same way. Many learners spend years repeating things they already understand. Easy videos, easy lessons, easy exercises, content that feels comfortable. The problem: comfort creates confidence, but challenge creates growth. Your brain only changes when it has to work slightly harder than before. That's why some people study for 3 years and barely improve, while others improve dramatically in 1 year. It's not always about time. It's about what happens during that time. Are you challenging your brain, or are you simply entertaining it? That's a difficult question, because comfortable learning feels productive. But often, it's just familiar, and familiarity can become a hidden trap. Now, before we continue, I want you to think about something. When was the last time English felt difficult? Not impossible, just difficult. When was the last time you listened to something and understood only 70%? When was the last time you spoke, even though you weren't fully ready? If your answer is, I can't remember, that might explain more than you think. But even learners who challenge themselves often face another invisible problem. And this one is surprisingly emotional. Let's imagine two students. Both study English for 30 minutes every day. Both use similar resources. Both have similar levels. One improves steadily. The other keeps quitting and restarting. Month after month, year after year. What's the difference? It's not talent. It's not intelligence. It's their relationship with mistakes. Many learners treat mistakes like enemies. Every error feels like proof they're failing. Every awkward sentence feels embarrassing. Every pronunciation mistake feels painful. So they avoid situations where mistakes might happen. They stay silent. They wait. They prepare more and more and more until someday becomes never. But here's something strange. Children become fluent in languages while making thousands of mistakes. Thousands. Imagine if a child stopped speaking every time they made an error. They would never learn. Mistakes aren't evidence that you're bad at English. They're evidence that you're learning English. And yet so many adults secretly believe the opposite, because adults want to sound correct. Children just want to communicate. One mindset creates progress. The other creates fear. And fear is one of the biggest hidden barriers in language learning. In fact, sometimes the problem isn't English at all. Sometimes it's fear wearing an English costume. Fear of sounding stupid. Fear of being judged. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of not being good enough. And here's the ironic part. The more you wait to feel confident before speaking, the less confident you become, because confidence doesn't come before action. Confidence comes from action. That's why some learners with limited vocabulary speak freely, and some learners with huge vocabularies stay silent. Knowledge isn't always the problem. Courage often is. Now, the fourth reason is one that almost nobody notices. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Imagine trying to grow a tree. Every few days, you dig it up to check whether it's growing. You look at the roots, measure the height, inspect every leaf. Then you put it back. A week later, you do it again. Sounds ridiculous, right? But that's exactly how many people learn English. Every day they ask themselves, am I improving? Why am I still making mistakes? Why don't I sound fluent yet? Why is this taking so long? They become obsessed with measuring progress. And because language growth is slow, they rarely notice it. So they feel discouraged, even when they're actually improving. Here's something fascinating. When you see a friend every day, you don't notice them aging. But if you don't see them for 5 years, the difference is obvious. Language growth works the same way. Daily changes are tiny, almost invisible, but over months, the transformation can be incredible. The problem is that most learners focus on what they still can't do, instead of noticing what they can do now that they couldn't do before. Maybe 6 months ago, you couldn't understand English podcasts. Now you understand 60%. Maybe a year ago, you needed subtitles. Now you don't. Maybe 2 years ago, you couldn't introduce yourself. Now you can have a 10-minute conversation. Those changes matter, but because they happen slowly, your brain often ignores them. And when progress feels invisible, motivation disappears, which brings us to the final reason. And honestly, this might be the most important one of all. It's also the reason many learners stay stuck for years without realizing it. At first, it sounds harmless. In fact, it sounds responsible, even smart. Many learners tell themselves, I'll start speaking when my grammar is better. I'll start conversations when I know more vocabulary. I'll join discussions when I feel ready. It sounds logical, reasonable, safe, but hidden inside that idea is a dangerous illusion, because ready is a moving target. The better you become, the more you notice what you still don't know. You learn 100 new words, then discover another 1,000. You improve your pronunciation, then notice 10 more sounds you want to fix. You learn a grammar rule, then find 5 exceptions, and suddenly, readiness keeps moving farther away, like chasing the horizon. No matter how far you walk, it stays ahead of you. The truth is that almost nobody feels ready. Not beginners, not intermediate learners, not advanced learners, not even native speakers. In every situation, think about it. Have you ever heard someone say, I'm waiting until my language is perfect before I speak it? Of course not, because perfection isn't a destination. It's a fantasy. And for many learners, that fantasy quietly steals years of progress. Years. Imagine 2 people starting English on the same day. The first person waits until they're ready. The second person starts speaking immediately. Awkwardly, imperfectly, uncomfortably. Who improves faster? The answer is obvious. Not because the second person is smarter, but because they collect experience instead of waiting for confidence. And experience is where fluency is born. There's a hidden truth about language learning that most people discover too late. Fluency doesn't come from knowing enough English. Fluency comes from using the English you already know. Read that again, because it's one of the most important ideas in this entire video. Many learners already know far more English than they think. The problem isn't a lack of knowledge. It's a lack of trust. Trust in themselves. Trust in the process. Trust that imperfect English is still communication. And communication is the whole point. Let me tell you something that might surprise you. Some of the most effective communicators in English are not the people with the biggest vocabularies. They're not the people who know the most grammar. They're the people willing to communicate with what they have. They don't wait for perfect words. They use available words. They don't wait for perfect pronunciation. They speak anyway. They don't wait for certainty. They move forward with uncertainty. And that changes everything, because every conversation teaches something. Every mistake teaches something. Every awkward moment teaches something. Every misunderstanding teaches something. The experiences that feel uncomfortable today often become the reason you're confident tomorrow. But there's another trap hidden beneath all of this. A trap that's becoming more common every year. We live in a world filled with endless English content. Thousands of videos, millions of lessons, unlimited tips, unlimited advice, unlimited resources. And at first, that sounds wonderful. But for many learners, it creates a strange problem. They become addicted to preparation. They keep searching for the perfect method, the perfect course, the perfect teacher, the perfect app, the perfect strategy. And while they're searching, they're not actually learning. They're consuming information about learning. There's a difference. Imagine someone who spends 6 months researching fitness programs, watching workout videos, reading nutrition articles, comparing exercise plans, but never exercising. Would they become stronger? No. And yet many learners spend years researching English instead of living English. The next video promises the secret. The next app promises faster results. The next method promises fluency. So they keep searching. Meanwhile, the learner who simply listens, reads, speaks, and shows up consistently keeps moving forward. Not because their method is magical, because consistency beats perfection every single time. That's why some learners make incredible progress with ordinary resources, and others struggle despite having access to the best tools in the world. Resources matter, but repetition matters more. Strategy matters, but consistency matters more. Talent matters a little, but persistence matters a lot. And here's something beautiful. You don't need perfect conditions to improve. You don't need perfect grammar. You don't need perfect pronunciation. You don't need perfect confidence. You don't need perfect motivation. You just need movement. Small movement, daily movement, consistent movement. Because language learning is less like winning a race and more like growing a garden. You can't force a seed to become a tree overnight. You water it, you care for it, you trust the process, and for a while, nothing seems to happen. Then one day, you notice growth, not because it suddenly appeared, because it was happening the whole time, quietly, under the surface. Many learners quit during that invisible stage, right before improvement becomes visible, right before confidence starts growing, right before conversations become easier, right before everything begins to click. And that's tragic, because often they are much closer than they realize. Maybe that's true for you too. Maybe you've been focusing on what isn't working. Maybe you've been measuring yourself against impossible standards. Maybe you've been waiting for confidence to arrive before taking action. Maybe you've been collecting English instead of using it. Maybe you've been treating mistakes like enemies instead of teachers. Maybe you've been expecting fast results from a process that naturally takes time. If any of those sound familiar, here's the good news. Nothing is wrong with you. Your brain is capable of learning English. The question isn't whether you can improve. The question is whether you're focusing on the right things. Because the learners who eventually succeed aren't always the smartest. They're not always the most talented. They're not always the fastest. They're simply the ones who keep going, the ones who speak before they're ready, the ones who make mistakes and continue anyway, the ones who stop chasing perfection, the ones who trust the process long enough to see the results. And one day, something remarkable happens. A conversation feels easier. A movie becomes understandable. A sentence comes naturally. A word appears without effort. A joke finally makes sense. And suddenly, you realize something. You're not the same learner you were before. You've changed. You've grown. You've improved. Not in one dramatic moment, but through hundreds of small moments nobody noticed, including you. So if your English feels stuck right now, remember this. Feeling stuck and being stuck are not the same thing. Sometimes growth is happening where you can't yet see it. Sometimes progress is quieter than expected. And sometimes the biggest breakthrough comes right after the moment you feel like giving up. Keep listening. Keep reading. Keep speaking. Keep making mistakes. Keep showing up, because fluency isn't built in a day. It's built in the days when you don't feel like you're improving. But continue anyway. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the version of yourself who thought they would never improve was already on the way. They just didn't know it yet.